McDaniel can't move on it. Now he does. The shot, passing down. Rebound, score!
Hey everyone, welcome to the Toe in the Crease Podcast, where we talk about anything and everything to do with the NHL. This is our inaugural episode, so welcome. I'm your host. I'm SJ. That's WillyDubz over there.
Yo, what's up, everyone? How y'all doing?
And how's everything been going? This is our first episode, so
yeah, not too bad. I think this is our first episode, but we did try a few recording locations before. So I'm actually in Hamilton, so in a basement, so a little bit rough, but it's better than nothing, I suppose.
Not in a cave, which you would guess, right? It looks like it looks similar to those Osama bin Laden terrorist videos, but no, not the case.
Jeez.
But yeah,
how many of those videos have you watched?
you want go back and watch those videos. Anyways, this is our first episode. Again, we had a couple technical issues, so that's why this is kind of a little bit later in the season. But we finally got everything seems to be working. Again, I hope you guys join us. We're just going to talk anything and everything to do with the NHL. Wilson will probably talk about some prospect or World Junior stuff at some point, which it's December, so that's going to come up soon. But right now, we're around what? We're almost past a quarter of the way into the season, give or take?
Yeah, we're about a quarter. We're more than a quarter into the season. I think I don't want to say we're at the halfway point, but we're pretty close to the halfway point almost kind of. Every team's played around 24, 23 games. So, another 17 games away till the halfway point. So,
yeah. So, we're going to be doing this weekly. We're going to talk about a bunch of different things. Sometimes we'll do a regular episode and a fantasy hockey episode because, yes, double threat. We do dabble in that too. So this episode, we're just going to talk about a couple things we've noticed early in the year. We'll do a thumbs up, thumbs down segment where we just highlight both the highlights and the lowlights of the season for individual players, teams, whatever. And then we'll also do a guess that player and just a couple things to end the podcast usually. Do you want to start with the first? What's your first observation? Say a quarter into the season, would you say, WillyDubz?
Ooh, so I think this one might be this one. Oh, I'll start with this one then. So one of the better surprises in the NHL this year, the Washington Capitals. Now, if you look at the top of the NHL standings right now, you're going to see a few teams up there where you definitely didn't think they would be up there. So Minnesota's one of them, I think. Washington's the other one.
You know, I'm never going to believe in Minnesota, ever. Maybe this is a Stars fan. I know it's weird. I'm wearing the Johnny Canuck hat, but I'm a Dallas Stars fan. I don't know what it is. I'll just never believe in the Minnesota Wild.
Oh, just for other people who know, just context wise, SJ here despises the Wild just because they try to steal the Stars' history. So that's one of the biggest reasons I think you hate them. Second, I don't think you were ever a believer of them, even when I think Dina Basin was the coach. Those were their best years, I think.
I liked the Dwayne Rollison, Manny Fernandez, Marian Gaborik early years. I kind of believe there was something there, but I don't know if that was my inexperience as a hockey fan, that youthful inexperience there. I still remember they made it to the Western Conference Finals and got swept. But yeah, that was against
the Ducks. I think that was the other quote unquote.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I kind of believed back then, but overall, I don't hate the Wild. I just for years there's always been this maybe this is the year, and they always lose in the first. Usually the first round. I think occasionally they maybe get to the second round, but usually they're just first round fodder. Look, we all called them the Minnesota Mild for a reason. I will say this year, I'm a little with Kaprizov leading the league in scoring. I do like Boldy a lot. There are players I like on that team. I'm still wait and see on them. But sorry, continue with the Capitals as you were saying.
So the Capitals have definitely surprised us this year. First of all, they're first in their division, first in the Metro. They're ahead of a bunch of teams that you probably wouldn't expect them to be ahead of. So I know we had the Devils and the Rangers ranked above them when we were discussing one-on-one. Rangers being I think they were the reigning president. I'm assuming reigning President's Trophy winning team, right?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I got that right. The Devils, who we thought would improve, finally fixed their goaltending problems, fixed their defense. But yeah, the Washington Capitals have surprised us quite a bit. And I'm not surprised in terms of when you look at their advanced stats. I'm not surprised they're doing well. They're not particularly bad in any set category. So just for example, they're 8th in expected goals for. They're middle of the league in expected goals against, but I think you can get away with that. As long as you're middle of the league and you're not like bottom half of the league, you can kind of get away with those kind of things. They're 11th in high danger chances for, and they're 15th in high danger chances against. So again, 11th is, I'll say, closer to the top of the league. 15th is like closer to the middle of the league. So towards upper half, middle of the league with that. And then their special teams this year has improved quite a bit. So their PK in particular, I think they had they definitely did not have a great PK last year. So they're 4th in PK percentage. Their power play, you have Ovechkin, so it can never be truly that bad. You always have the threat of the slap shot from the point or the one-timer. So they're 14th in power play percentage. Yep. And although I would say Ovechkin's hurt now, so we'll see how their power play gets affected. But they've been playing well as a team. And it's funny because we had the Penguins. We thought maybe the Penguins would be the better team because they tried to do the whole keep the veteran things going, get all the veteran players. But the Capitals have been kind of rewarded because they've done it the right way. So they've done it with a younger core, younger players. Yeah, you want to speak on something?
I was just saying, I think the Capitals are just... So one thing I always talk about is found value. And so for people to ask, what does found value mean? It means like within moves, just finding random or unexpected positive value in salary cap moves that you don't expect, especially in a salary cap league where every team only has the same amount to spend, right? This isn't MLB where the Dodgers can just buy whatever all-star they want and defer the salary for 500 years, right? Every team works under the same salary cap. And I think there's a real testament to Brian McClellan's ability to find value in places you wouldn't expect, right? Like, look at all the moves he's made for a team that you thought would be rebuilding or similar to what the Penguins are now, right? If you think about the original core of that team, which was Backstrom, Ovechkin, Oshie, John Carlson, Braden Holtby, and again, I'm going back here a bit, and Evgeny Kuznetsov, only 2 of those guys are left, right? And Carlson's basically close to on his last legs, I would say. Ovechkin's still Ovechkin, but you could tell he's not the same guy he used to be, right? But Holtby is now out of the league. Kuznetsov's playing in Russia. Backstrom is medically retired, basically, right? And Oshie's retired as well, essentially. But you look at all the moves he's made since then, and it's a testament to like his ability to find value, right? Dylan Strome was available for nothing, basically. Acquired him, right? Logan Thompson, any team could have had him in a trade. Went and got him and used that as like a buffer against Charlie Lindgren's regression, which did happen. Signed Jacob Chicherin. Traded for Rasmus Sandin. Traded for PLD when I remember we were talking about it as like this could be a good change of scenery for both guys, but everyone crapped on them for that. And while PLD's numbers haven't been there, if you watch his game to game, like the hustle, the forechecking, the two-way play, it's really good. And it's all these moves that like find value in places you don't expect, and it stacks, right? And right now, with the only constants of the team from like the other years, again, being Ovechkin, Carlson, and I guess we can include Tom Wilson, everything else has just been revamped completely. And for them to be where they are is, I think, a real testament to Brian McClellan's GMing and Spencer Carberry's coaching. And when you have that GM and coach that's in sync the way they are, it's what you have here, basically.
Well, I was going to highlight Dubois, too. Dubois at 0.75 points per game, which it's not great for his contract and his value, but it's significantly better than what he did last year. And you got rid of a guy in Darcy Kemper who really struggled here last year. You replaced him with Logan Thompson, like you mentioned. I think Thompson's actually younger too. You replaced him with a younger, better goalie. I think on a better salary too. So funny enough, it's been a better move all around. The PLD move has worked out I think it's worked out for all parties. I think LA is probably okay with Kemper and what they've got for him. PLD's playing like, I don't want to say like he cares, but it looks like he's giving full effort.
It's a lot better for sure.
Yeah. And I think one person you forgot to mention is Matt Roy. Depends on how you want to pronounce it. I'm so used to Patrick Waugh, so don't judge me, people.
No, I know what you mean, yeah.
But yeah, he's definitely helped improve the penalty kill, and Washington definitely did not have a top 5 penalty kill last year, and he was one of the better penalty killers in LA last year. So he's definitely helped that aspect of the game. And I think one other thing I want to highlight too is kind of the youth movement in Washington. So all the moves they made to bring in guys have worked out. But I think their youth, they got younger and their youth has stepped up. So the biggest one by far is Connor McMichael. For those who do fantasy hockey, everyone calls him the other Connor.
The other Connor.
The other
So
Connor.
where does Kyle I don't know, where does Kyle Connor fit, or does it have to be first name only?
I think it has to be first name Connor,
Okay,
and I think it's
okay.
also because McDavid, McMichael, like the Connor Mick.
Yeah.
So the other Connor, that's what they call him. He's currently point per game. He's been playing at a really high level. There is going to be some regression with him. So a 19.7 shooting percentage is probably not sustainable. But before we did this research and everything, he had only one power play point. I think he's up to 5 now because I think Ovechkin being gone has definitely let the power play points kind of spread out a little bit more. So I don't know what's going to happen with McMichael. He'll probably regress a little bit, but I mean, when your young guys performing, that's great. They have a few other guys too that perform pretty well too. I think I'm gonna butcher this name. Protest, Alexei Protest,
yeah.
I think. He's 21 points in 24 games. He's been performing very well. I think Tom Wilson's been his normal self. Strome's been out of the world. PLD's been fine. And I think overall, if you look at their D-core, John Carlson, I know you said he was on his last legs, but he has 19 points in 24 games, so kind of a renaissance year compared to last year.
Yeah,
last year,
especially compared to last year, yeah.
Yeah, he was dead in the rights last year.
It's just crazy to me. This team went from being the last year, they were the worst playoff team I can remember to actually make the playoffs. Like goal differential negative. You looked like the way they played, it looked like they were just struggling to win games a lot of times. And this year, again, I'll say this for teams that have won the cup, and you notice this with Tampa to a lesser extent, it's hard to toe the line between retooling and getting younger and keeping your contention window open. It's a really hard thing to do, right? Because generally your younger guys aren't ready to be playoff contenders, right? They're not ready to assist you on that journey. But the older guys only have so many years left. But like I said, all these moves have made the team better while making them younger, which is like again, I think that's the hardest job in sports to do. And again, Brian McClellan, like A+ for me, no question.
Yeah. It's always easier to get better, but it's harder to get younger and better. And I think Strome is still pretty young. They picked him up in 2022, gave him a few years. It's worked out especially this year too, off the scrap heap. McMichael was obviously one of their draft picks, so he I think was a first round. I think it was like middle first round one of the years back. He's slowly developed. Wasn't so great last year, but he's developed into a great player for them this year. I think Protest is kind of a similar build. I think he's not a first round pick, but give him some time in the minors. He's built his way up. And then I think someone such as Logan Thompson too. He's only 27 too. So being able to pick up a good, solid young goalie.
They've done a great job and they're fun to watch. And again, ideally, while progression isn't linear, this team should only get better because again, most of these guys are in that 25 or 24 to 28, 29 range with, again, Ovechkin, Carlson kind of being the vets to lean on, right?
So there is one concern with this team. I don't think it's realistic to assume they'll finish first in their division this year. There's going to be some regression that hits. Their shooting percentages are hovering around the 19-20% range for a lot of their guys.
That's fine. I mean, people had them out of the playoffs and potentially battling.
I mean, I had them out too, to be fair. So
yeah, potentially had them battling for a top 5 pick. Being where they are, even if they regress, it's fine. Again, perfectly fine.
I think my prediction for them is four, probably finish maybe 4th. I think 3rd is possible given some of the slow starts by the Rangers, especially. So maybe they even can hold on to 3rd. But they're at the minimum, they're a wild card playoff team, and they're actually a better wild card playoff team
than they were last year. Yeah,
yeah.
No, for sure. All right, we'll move on to my next one here. So we'll talk about found value with Brian McClellan. This kind of relates to my next topic in a different way. So for me, it's the Red Wings. Look, the wing wheel right now, it's not working. It's rusted. If you look at them, we're talking about, so Steve Yzerman became GM in April of 2019. We are 5 years into this thing, and the offense is just this year. So here's the thing. To me, they're the most disappointing team of the year so far. I know that's hard to say with what's going on in Pittsburgh, with what's going on in New York, with what's going on in Tampa to a lesser extent, right? But here's the thing. Detroit was basically should have been in the playoffs last year. They didn't make it due to a tiebreaker, right? And this was a team that, again, building for 4 years at that point to this point, right? So what did you expect this year? They make the supplementary moves, and then I'm not saying they had to be a contender, just a firm playoff team. And this year, with Boston starting off extremely slow and having to fire their coach. Again, Tampa didn't get off to a really hot start. Toronto started off hot, but they've cooled a bit like recently. Like the Atlantic is there, and not to mention Ottawa and Buffalo are still being Ottawa and Buffalo for the most part, right? It was there, but their offense is horrible. They're 28th in goals for, which bear in mind, there's Chicago and Anaheim there, so they're second last in shots for. So this isn't bad. This isn't bad shooting luck. They're not producing enough chances, and they're last in high danger chances for. So people point to advanced statistics all the time, and for me, one advanced stat doesn't mean everything. But when you're, again, 28th in goals for, second last in shots for, last in high danger chances for, it paints a picture. And when you watch them under Alex Lalonde right now, it's such an unappealing play style. Like, what they do is they play a low event hockey style where they try to suppress their high danger chances against, right? So they end up closing all these passing lanes and compressing in. But all teams do to counter around this is they just pass it around the perimeter, basically, right? So now Detroit's being outpossessed, and it leads to the other team having a high amount of possession and chances, while Detroit doesn't have as many opportunities themselves. The only reason they're not dead last in the league is because the goaltending's playing out of their mind right now. Cam Talbot's 5th in goal save above expected, and he is saving them in a lot of these games. And even if you look at some of their wins, they're some of the luckiest wins I've ever seen. They won a game despite only having 10 shots on goal. I think that's the lowest since, I think somebody pulled it up, it was the 1930s or something like that. When they beat the Islanders. They beat the Islanders 3 times. So, that's a big chunk of it. And their power play is 4th in the league right now, despite only being 23rd in opportunities. So, they're being completely sustained on the goaltending on their power play, and just random guys shooting out of their mind right now. Like Dylan Larkin shooting at 20%, Andrew Kopp's around 20%, Alex DeBrincat himself is around 16%. It's the way they're just winning, even in their wins, is unsustainable. They're not fun to watch, and the offense overall has been terrible. And when I look at this team, it's don't get me wrong, there's potential there, right? You have Larkin, you have Raymond.
I feel like we said that for 5 or 6 years though, haven't we? We've always said there's potential. But when I look at this team, I just see I see some first round picks who have panned out and some first round picks who haven't. And I think I don't want to say that's a testament to maybe the scouting department or Yzerman, but at a certain point, I'm almost questioning when does Yzerman potentially get the boot? Because it has to be coming soon at some point.
Well, so here's the thing, right? It's again, I look at that team, the draft picks have been good. So Larkin, Raymond, I do like the Sider and Edvinsson pairing. They do look good, and they do play tough minutes and look good, which is very difficult for young defense. Normally, young defensemen are sheltered, right? If you look at guys like Olen Zellweger or Pavel Minchikov, or even I'm just using the Ducks as examples, but even when
you've named literally every young Ducks defenseman possible.
But or if you remember when the Blackhawks brought Kevin Korchinski up last year, kind of did the same thing. The Red Wings are not doing that, and to their credit, Sarda and Edvinsson have been doing pretty well, right? But the FA signings on this team have been so underwhelming. It's this past offseason, they swapped Ghost for Gustafsson, and anybody who's watched Eric Gustafsson could tell you that he's a power play special. He's basically Tyson Barrie, and that's it. Any Rangers fan could have told you, any Caps fan could have told you, anybody could have told you that if he's not on power play 1, there's no point of having him. But they not only did they sign him, they swapped Gostisbehere to get him, and Gostisbehere is thriving in Carolina right now, right? They signed guys like Justin Holl and Ben Chirot, who everybody could have told you watching these
Don't
guys.
sign those guys.
Right? They traded for Jeff Petrie, who was basically washed in Pittsburgh. They signed Andrew Kopp and JT Compher, who don't really move the needle. They're safe signings who don't really move the needle in any way. And it's kind of weird because now they've built this team where they didn't do the tanking route. I don't want to use Edmonton or Pittsburgh as an example, where they just tanked for a bunch of years and accrued all these assets. They didn't do that. But they built a team that's again, I think ideally there should be a fringe playoff team, but they're definitely not a contender. And then one thing Steve Yzerman was really great at in in Tampa was, again, when like look at Brian McClellan, it's like he was great at like the plus value moves or the additional value moves, right? They found Cirelli, they found Braden Point, they found Nikita Kucherov beyond the first round. Like they made all these moves, the McDonough trade, they made moves to get guys to push that team above just hitting in the first round. And for a guy who's touted as like probably, top 5, top 3 GM in hockey, where are those value moves? And you can't tell me that other teams that are good teams, make those moves. Like, I'm a Stars fan. Look, Rope Hintz, outside the first round. Jason Robertson, second round. Ottinger, late first round. Wyatt Johnson, with the pick Detroit traded Dallas, late first round. Signed Matt Duchene from a buyout from Nashville, basically. Signed Mason Marchment, right? Like, Bill Zito, when he came to Florida, signed Carter Verhaeghe for nothing. Signed Gustav Forsling for nothing. Again, signed Anthony Stolarz last year before the Cup run. Good GMs. Bill Guerin's working with a cap deficit in Minnesota. They found ways to make moves, right? Like, they got Brock Faber for Kevin Fiala. They've made all these signings that work, like Philip Gustafsson for basically nothing. All these moves, teams find value. And I don't know where the plus value is here. And that's what kind of bugs me about what's going on here is it's just, hey, like, let's hope these draft picks hit year after year. And it's like, that's not a viable strategy. Anybody can do that. You could sign me and you to be the GM of the Rings and hope that, like, the first round picks hit and beyond that have no expectations. Like, I don't know. I just don't understand what's going on. And this kind of also brings me back to a larger question. How long does a GM get in terms of years? I'm not saying the Red Wings have to be a cup contender, no. But, like, how long do you get from starting from a rebuild to being a playoff team? Because I really want to know. Because
my thing has always been, I've always been under the assumption you get about roughly 5 years. Because, like, the first 2 to 3 years, you're going to really, really, if you're trying to rebuild, the chances are you're going to really, really suck. And you're going to get a lot of higher draft picks. And obviously those high draft picks, you're going to try to throw them in the end. Most of the time, you're probably going to, if you're, let's say, their first overall pick, they're probably going to end up playing day one, right? And them playing day one on a bad team, usually not great for their development. Plus, you don't really have many pieces around them. So I think it's around year 3 or 4. That's when you start to sign free agents that you hope, will help supplement your young core, right? Because a lot of the times in year 1 and 2, you kind of have those veterans on 1-year deals that you're just hoping to ship off for assets around the trade deadline, right? So I've always said it's around 5 years, and I think Yzerman's I almost want to say he's had about 5 years now.
Well, he was GM in April of 2019, so if they miss the playoffs this year, next year would be the 6th year.
Yeah, he's had 5 years, and I hate to say this, but the strategy of hitting on first-round picks hasn't even really worked out for them either. Because Larkin, I'm going to push back and say that Larkin wasn't really his pick. It's something he kind of inherited. So when I look back at their first-round picks, I'm going to ignore the last 2 years because the last 2 years, none of them have played yet. So I'm going to hold my judgment on those guys. Although I will say their 9th pick from, I think, 2023, I'm not a fan of Nate Danielson. When I read the scouting reports and you tell me he's a hardworking, good skating player, all I think of is a third liner, and that's and you don't need third liners on a team that's kind of full of
literally full of third line. Even if they hit on all your first round picks, like, where's the additional value? We went over Brian McClellan. Look at all those additional value moves, and you can't tell me those moves weren't available for Steve Yzerman.
I was gonna say, if you hit all your first round picks, it buys you a bit more time. That's the other thing, because if your rookies and young guys can kind of prop the team up, we expect them to be a mediocre playoff team, right? If those young picks hit, they're definitely at least a mediocre playoff team, and it definitely buys you a bit more time if you're Yzerman. But the problem is those picks haven't even hit. So, and now that you mentioned, the added value is not there either. It's like, what kind of team do you end up having? And the team they end up having is, I'm going to use a Gen Z term. It's literally the middest of mid teams.
It's the Minnesota Mild X amount of years ago, right? But it just bugs me because people try to defend it saying, well, what was available to him? And I look at, again, Brian McClellan, like Dylan Strome for nothing, PLD for basically nothing. They could have signed Sandin. They could have traded for Sandin. They could have signed Chychrun. Like, I look at, again, some of these other teams in the league have made, like, St. Louis, right? I don't think St. Louis is anywhere near a cup window, but, like, the Broberg and Holloway moves were good moves, right? Like you see Broberg come in when he's healthy, and he looks like with the more ice time and more playing time, he looks like he could be something, right? Like where was that potential move? And I wouldn't even mind if some of the free agent signings were like high upside potential to hit. Even if they flamed out, I could see the rationale. It's like they're signing guys like, again, Andrew Kopp and JT Compher who are fine, but there's no upside to those guys really, right? And then even some of the other moves they made, like they traded Jake Wallman. They gave up a second-round pick to trade Jake Wallman to San Jose. And Jake Wallman's been really good. And people's argument was, well, he's only really like a fourth defenseman on a good team. Well, newsflash, you should probably keep him because you're not a good team, right?
Yeah,
like,
I was gonna say, you know, there's a difference between we're a playoff contender and we need, you know, better, or we need cheaper, you know, fourth D players than, oh, my defense sucks. After our first two guys we don't have anyone. Let's trade our third or fourth best guy for. I want to say absolutely nothing, but that's pretty much what it is.
Well, listen, you gave up something to get rid of him. It's like if I wanted to get rid of my car and I had to pay the hauling cost for you to move it. Like, that's what it was, basically. And again, when you say 5 years, like, for me, that's crazy. Because, like, at that point, being a rebuilding GM is, like, the best job in all of sports. Like, you get 5 years of job security.
So what do you think, then? Is it 2-3 years for you, or, like...
I think it should be... I think 3. Like, and I mean 3, like, I think 3 years, honestly. And also it depends, right? Are you, like, just tanking out? I mean 3 years to see some sizable progress. And the argument could be made, like, Yzerman's made progress year to year because their point totals have increased. But, like, the
point totals don't matter if you don't make the playoffs at the end of the day. That's the way I see it. If you don't make the playoffs, like, it doesn't matter if you're getting linearly better, like, because at this point, I think their ceiling is literally.
And when I mean 3 years, I just want to like see a progress in. Forget the points. You're right. Like, I just want to see a progress in the product. Like, the Sharks are a good example. Do I think the Sharks point total is going to be better this year? Sure, but like, you watch the product on the ice. It's so much better to watch. Like,
it's fun to watch, and there's actual potential, right? I feel like that this team, there is no potential.
And like the Lalonde, like, I think he's probably gonna get fired, and people are gonna make that as an argument. But again, who hired the coach, right? For me, I wouldn't say, okay, maybe not 3 years, but like 4 years. I think by 4 years you should be a fringe playoff team when you consider how, one, half the conference makes the playoffs, and two, like, bear in mind, during those 4 years, you're rebuilding, you're collecting assets, you're making moves, and other teams are aging out during that time, right? Like Pittsburgh being an example. And again, it just something bugs me with this team because there's not the value moves there. They're not fun to watch. People are blaming the coaching, which makes sense, but again, who hired the coach, right? It's not fun to watch. It's unsustainable. And this is, if I'm a Red Wings fan, look, I'm a Stars fan. I remember when the Red Wings were the cream of the crop of the NHL. Like, Stars Red Wings was like this big rivalry, constant. Like, throughout the 90s, it was Avs, Red Wings, Stars, and it was just this thing, right?
Yeah, I remember those days because I remember they used to. I don't know if you remember these times, but you probably do because, like, this was around when I was starting to grow up. I remember the Red Wings used to make a lot of moves just to try to keep their playoff streak going. Like, a lot of really questionable. Will sign a lot of veterans to try to just keep the quote-unquote empire going, right? And then once they missed the playoffs, that's when they started to bottom out. And eventually they hit this point now where they have Yzerman as their GM, right? But I remember the days where they were, you know, cup contenders. They won the cup in, I think,
I still remember,
I want to say 07, 08.
I can't remember if it was 01, 02, 02, 03. Was like the greatest team I've ever seen. Was like Hall of Famers on every part of the roster. I think the third line that year was like young Datsuk and Zetterberg. They had like Brett Hull, Luke Robitaille, Nick Lidstrom, Steve Yzerman, Dominic It was ridiculous.
Yeah, they had Hasek, Osgood, and I think at one point they had Curtis Joseph as their backup at one point too. I think
it was like watching an all. It was, I can't remember what their record was that year, but I remember watching that team play, and I was like, oh, no one's beating this team. And it's crazy to see, like, from what that era was. Like, for me, that would have been 95 to like 2006, 2007 to like where they are now, where they're just ignored by hockey media outside of, like people like me bringing this up.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to me.
But yeah, maybe one more point to add, I guess, with the Yzerman thing. It just kind of popped into my head right now. I know you mentioned Lalonde. Obviously him hiring him. I think first off, I think you called him. What did you call him before? I think his name's actually Derek Lalonde, but not. I don't know what you called him.
Sorry, Alex Lalonde is. I forget.
I think you're thinking of somebody else. But
Yeah,
yes, that's the first point. I'll correct it before we get crucified in the comments, because that'd be brutal if we
Okay.
get crucified for that. Second, before they hired Lalonde, I know when Yzerman came on, he kept was it Jeff Blashill? And he was a terrible coach. And I think that was kind of my first strike against Yzerman. It's like, he's not a great coach yet. I get it. There's not that much else better out there, but you have to at least try. Like at least.
So I think that's
get
another
your first
criticism we can talk about. Where like it felt like during that rebuild he's just biding his time, and it's like that's not. To me, you can't do that in a league where, again, I look at like a team like San Jose, right? With all the dead cap space they have, it's like sign Tyler Toffoli to accelerate, like to make the team better. Again, they're talking about extending Granlund when ideally you would sell him for an asset, but
they got Granlund. Granlund was a great move for them, right, for the Sharks. And then I think like they made some moves to get younger as well. Like they took a risk, acquired Askarov. They're letting their rookies play. I mean,
it's not just hey, we're in a rebuild, like we're okay if this sucks, we'll just ride it out. They're not doing that. And like I think another example of where I don't think it's going well either, just to kind of piggyback off that, is Chicago, where it feels like they're doing what Detroit's doing. Where we're just riding out, because I think Luke Richardson should be fired, but they're just kind of riding it out, and I don't think that's the way to go. And again, like I just don't know what the plan is outside of hoping that, like I just want to see it working, because it should, like by year 5, there should be a clear offensive and defensive identity, and there's not. And it just
by year 5 you should be making the playoffs, and they haven't even made the playoffs in any even year 4. In year 5 it doesn't even look like they're going to make the playoffs, right? So I think for me, I think Yzerman's done after this year. I know he's a Red Wings legend and he might get a little bit more slack just because of that, but I feel like if I was Red Wing ownership, I don't care if you're a legend. Like I haven't seen anything out of you in 5 years. I don't want to say you've done nothing right, but the only things you've done right are, I think, drafting Raymond and Sider. Those are the only two I can think of, because the other ones...
I really like Edvinsson, but
Edvinsson's fine, but I think after that, it's like Casper, he's playing a third line role. I can't really make a judgment on him because this is his first year. Kosa hasn't, developed as planned.
Well, we'll see on the other guys, but yeah, like it can't just be that. Just can't be your calling card. And I say this again as a fan of a team where usually like the first round picks do pretty well, right? But that just can't be your calling card, right?
And your first and your late round picks do well.
Yeah, but for me, it's just I just watched this after 5 years, and again, not to beat a dead horse here, but again, there's no identity. It's not watchable. I don't know what the future is outside of praying your top picks hit, and like you could say that part for any team, right? And it just sucks to watch, man, and it sucks too because like Detroit's such a good hockey market, and
they're forced to get saddled with this shit.
It's just like I want to see this team be good again, because when Detroit's good, it's fun to watch. Like I'm not gonna lie, I hated when they beat Dallas, but like I'll admit it was fun to watch. Like watching the rivalries were fun.
Well, the league is definitely better when Detroit's better.
And
right?
when they came over to the East, like X amount of years ago, everyone thought like they were gonna be the class of the East, and it just hasn't worked out that way. And again, I just love to see it. And it sucks to watch what's happening in Detroit. So let's move on here, because I feel like I've been beating the winged wheel endlessly right now. What's your second point there?
So okay, I'll go with this one then. So my second one is the Boston Bruins and their struggles this year. So coming into this year, we had some expectations that maybe the Bruins wouldn't be as great as they were in years past, but I didn't think it would get to this point, to the point where their coach actually got fired, and their coach, funny enough, that they fired immediately got picked up like 3 days after. Yeah, and I was gonna bring that up first. So Jim Montgomery being fired. I think you were a big fan of him when he was in Dallas. He realized what was.
I can speak to this a little bit with Monty. Is One thing I did like was his adaptability. So one, Dallas took a chance on him because he was a college coach, and like if you know the NHL, it is the old boys club of old boys clubs when it comes to coaches. I think Lindy Ruff's on like his 6th coaching tenure at this point or something like that. But
Yep.
but beyond the point, like so Jim Montgomery came in and he tried to play an offensive system initially and realized Dallas did not have the talent for it at the time. And if you remember the Stars at that time, it was literally like Sagan, Ben, Klingberg, and not much else. Like Radek Faksa was like
Oh
the
dear
third
Lord.
line. Like no, like the third line center. Like it just there wasn't much there, and immediately Dallas was getting their brains beat in for like the first 2 weeks, and then he shifted to like a more defensive style, which again more low event hockey, more shot suppression, and centered it around Ben Bishop and guys playing 2-way hockey and more defensive hockey. And Dallas made the second round of the playoffs that year before losing to St. Louis. I still believe he would be the Stars coach if it wasn't for him getting fired for his own personal indiscretions there. So yeah, no, I do think he is a really good coach. I was kind of like annoyed when Boston got him initially. I was like, really? Like Dallas lost him, and then he rights the ship.
I feel like he went to the perfect team too. I feel like Montgomery
Yeah.
going to Boston was like the perfect team because they play really good defense. We used to think they played really good defensive hockey, not so much this year. But I mean, I don't remember. I think they had Bergeron that 1 year. I think he had Bergeron just for 1 year, right? Like you had one of the best, defensive, like one of the best like defensive centers in all hockey. Selke Trophy. I think I honestly would joke the trophy might get named after him, like after this. But they fired Montgomery, and I think this is more a player issue than a coaching issue. And I think it's more of also a management issue too, rather than a Montgomery issue, right? Because a lot of the moves the Bruins have made just haven't worked out. So the biggest one I think was Elias Lindholm. So we thought he'd be the perfect kind of signing for Boston because I think they were
like
missing
a Bergeron light.
Yeah, we're missing a Bergeron light, exactly. They're missing a number one kind of center. Plus, they were trying to play Pavel Zacha there, and God knows that Pavel Zacha is not a number one center, not even a number 2 center. I'd argue he's a third line center if you're lucky.
Pavel Zacha is like Matthias Janmark light.
Yeah, I always joke he's one of the. I don't want to say he's a bust because he's still in the NHL and he's playing, but when you're a top 10 pick and you're that,
he's so bad offensively. Like it's crazy. I don't understand. It's like somebody maxed out the sliders of a hockey player and put all their attributes towards the defensive side and like none towards the offensive side except winning faceoffs. Like it's
what's funny. I always think of it like it's one of those things where you put all the sliders on defense, but then when you pick this position, you accidentally hit your controller the wrong way. And you and you made him a forward instead. So Pavel Zacha reminds you of a guy that picked the wrong position and then maxed the sliders thinking they picked the other one. So that's what I think of Zacha.
I do think you're right, but I don't know. Like I feel like Montgomery actually. Because there has been a steady talent drain and age-related decline post that Stanley Cup Finals year versus St. Louis where they lost. Like you think about this team, right? Like Rask retired, and they did a good job replacing with Ullmark and Swayman to an extent. But you look at this team now, like Marchand's obviously in the decline phase of his career. Again, like. Bergeron retired, Krejci retired, and like both your centers retiring basically in the same year leaves a massive hole, right? You look at like DeBrusk has left. You look at all like the talent drain that's gone on this year. I feel like if anything, Montgomery staved off what was supposed to be like a normal decline the last 2 years. And also, if you look at last year, their defense, like what we know Boston for, which is a very good defensive team for the most part. Last year, it wasn't that good. They weren't that good defensively. They were just buoyed heavily by Ullmark and Swayman. And I think this year you're seeing what happens when their goalies aren't playing to Vezina levels. Although Korpisalo is playing well to his credit, but when their goaltending is not playing to Vezina levels, the scoring just isn't there. And right now, and to be honest, this year like McAvoy has not been playing well either. So when the scoring and the defense aren't there, and the goaltending is not at Herculean levels, I think this is just what you get.
Yeah, and I was going to point out, too, someone like Pasternak, who was supposed to be their best player, he's not even point per game, and I took a look at the team, like the player stats overall. Pasternak's not point per game. I think he's got 23 points in 26 games. Marchand's a 0.65 per point per game kind of player. That's not great. He is getting older, so you should expect some decline, but probably not that level of decline. Lindholm is 0.5 points per game, and then everybody else after that is below 0.5. There's literally no offense on this team. And when I took a look at I think they're the best lines in terms of expected goals for in the NHL. The Bruins' best line, I think, is actually their fourth line. And if your fourth line is your best line in terms of expected goals for, that is a massive issue.
Well, if you look at their top six, right, and again, this is part of the talent drain I was speaking about. Like, if you look at the guys on their top six, a lot of these guys aren't top six forwards. Like, Justin Brazeau is not a top six forward. Morgan Geekie is not a first line forward. Pavel Zacha is not a first line center. They're just not guys that should be in those positions, and they haven't really had the prospects that came up. And like, again, you look at Washington, for example, where Connor McMichael and Alexei Protas have come in and played roles. Look at a team like, again, not to keep pointing at Dallas, but like Logan Stankoven came in, and while some of their other players were struggling, has really stepped up, right? Thomas Harley a bit last year, for example. Like, they don't have those guys. Although I do like Mason Lowry, again, just not the same level of impact. And when you combine like the talent drain without the young guys coming up, and again, without those free agent signings hitting or finding that extra value, I think that's why they are where they are. They're just lucky because, like I said, the Three Stooges in Ottawa, Buffalo, and Detroit just haven't been able to kick the door open while they've been struggling. But I do agree that, like, I feel like the time's coming up soon. I just do think, I don't want to say it was expected, but we were all kind of waiting for the bottom to fall out. I just think this year has just happened to be where all the chickens came to roost at the same time.
Yeah, and I think, like you mentioned, they're lucky that there's three teams that are somehow worse than them, right? Because if you think this is like the bottom fallout year, like I think for most teams the bottom fallout year is finished last year.
What's happening to Pittsburgh?
Yeah, and I think their bottom fallout's actually been like pretty good compared to the rest of other teams when their bottom falls out. But I think you highlighted it pretty well too. Like, they're seventh in expected goals against, but the problem is they allow a decent number of high danger chances against. So they're 17th for that, and I think that's, and this year in particular, you've noticed it with Swayman struggling. I think he's the 11th worst goalie in terms of expected or goal save above expected, so minus 6.4. So you can kind of see it. They allow enough high danger chances, and I guess when your goalie's not playing Vezina level, this is what happens. You're not that great defensively, and then in terms of offense,
they're just
you
weren't expecting this team to ball out offensively.
Well, they were 23rd in expected goals for. They're 18th in high danger chances for, and they have the league worst power. They still have the league worst power play. Because just for reference, we had some technical issues before we want to record this, and I had at the time written in my notes worst power play in the league. That still hasn't changed, and the worst part was I wrote less than 12%. That is still true to this day when I wrote it. They have a power play that is less than 12%, and I hate to say this, but they have some good pieces on it. It's like you have Pasternak, who's one of the better shots in the league, and you still can't make a power play, and you're probably still worse than an Anaheim or even a Chicago or like other teams that I know they have some younger players, but teams that are still bad. Somehow your power play is worse than theirs.
There's just a real lack. If you ever watch them too, and I hate to say just watch them, but like, there's just such a lack of playmaking and creativity on the team too. Unfortunately, for a lot of teams, like the Leafs, I think some teams like the Leafs are the exception, where Marner's a lot of their playmaking on the wing side. There are guys like that around the league, but like most teams have it come through their center position, right?
Yeah.
There's just such a lack of creativity on the team, and that's why I think the Pasternak start was as slow as it was. Is like, it's crazy because he doesn't even need a ton of service because he's that good of a shooter, but you just watch the team. It's painful to watch their offense work. I'm not saying, like, there's just a lack of creativity. Everything looks so, I don't want to explain it. It looks rehearsed almost in a way, if that's the best way to phrase it. It's like, you see what's happening, you know where it's going. Like, there's no flow and creativity. Whereas again,
it's literally the bad dress rehearsal.
It's mechanical.
It's the bad dress rehearsal, except usually a bad dress rehearsal means you have a good show. There hasn't been a good show either, to be fair.
And
so
it's just the lack of playmaking hinders them. And I think, again, unless they hit on a trade or a draft pick, I just think this is the trajectory of the Bruins, where again, it might not be, but they might creep into the playoffs this year, but I do think that decline's starting to happen because there doesn't seem to be like talents coming on the horizon to supplement what's here.
And I think we were joking about the NHL kind of being an old boys club, but I think it's time for Sweeney and Neely to go.
Okay, we can't
I
be
think
advocating to fire everybody.
well, I think to be fair, I do think a lot of the fault lies with them, right? Because Montgomery did his best to hold like he just had the duct tape like pressed up against the crack, whereas
or what's
it's
that
one of
flex
those
tape?
where
The flex tape?
yeah, the flex tape. He's holding the flex. He's the flex tape holding it all together, and like it's funny. I'm picturing like Sweeney and Neely with crowbars trying to pry the crack open themselves. That's kind of the way I'm picturing this team, and they haven't really made any moves to help this team. Like name me one of their, apart from the attempted Lindholm one, which didn't really work out, and the Zadorov signing, which
I did.
I'm not going to say.
I did like Hampus Lindholm when they got him back then. But yeah, it's been a bit.
Well, he's hurt, so that also doesn't help. It's the injuries when the injuries hit too.
Sure. I just think it's interesting because again, when you look at Detroit and Boston, one similarity is like we talked about them firing Lalonde, and Boston's already fired Montgomery. It's like you only get so many coaches you can fire before again. So like I'll say this. It wasn't unexpected they fired Montgomery because hey, no GM's gonna fire themselves, right? So, but like the next hire has to hit, and I don't know if I'm a coach. I don't know if I would want to take the job because like you're just what's the upside to Boston's situation right now? Yes, the team is young, and the argument could be yes, the team is young, sure, but how many of those young guys are like A+ blue chip talents? Like none, zero, and like don't get me wrong, somebody might randomly hit their like 99th percentile outcome, sure, but you
can't bank on that 99 percentile happening, right? Plus, I was gonna say I was surprised surprised they fired Montgomery because I thought the one chance they had was when they fired Cassidy. Like I thought that was their one, like, hey, the one firing you get. Because I hate to say this because
Cassidy's
they haven't won he's killing it too, but he also has like they didn't win a cup when they had him, so it's like, it's not like you had you won a cup with him and then you fired the coach that won a cup with you because hey, things got kind of stale. It's like you fired the guy, he didn't win you a cup. The next guy you brought in hasn't won you a cup either. Also, I will say, you had one of the best regular seasons and then you choked against, the 8th seed. That probably doesn't help either. But then now you fired I would say he's still one of the better coaches in the league. And, it's bad when some other team just says, screw it, fire our coach, grab him right away. That's an even worse look. And now you have to find your next coach. Like, this is really their last chance because otherwise, Don Sweeney is the next guy to get canned in Boston. It's not the next coach, it's him.
For sure. Yeah. I think so. Well, I mean, we'll see what Joe Sacco does, but I'm not holding out hope.
As having watched Joe Sacco coach, I'm pretty sure he coached some pretty bad Avalanche teams. He did not inspire any hope.
I know hates Joe Sacco for sure.
He did not inspire any hope within me. That's all I gotta say.
But guess what he does do? Take a guess. Anybody know? He's from Massachusetts, and that's all that matters.
Why am I not surprised?
He's definitely watched the town. All right, moving on to the next one here. So this is an interesting one. Again, this one I'm not advocating for anybody to get fired. I just think this is going to be really interesting to see. So I think the Canucks are going to be in a really important stretch of hockey. And again, theme here, but which will test the limits of Rick Tocchet's system. And I'm really interested to see how it works out. So we all know from his time in Phoenix, Rick Tocchet, low event hockey is a Rick Tocchet hallmark. But unlike Lalonde, Tocchet's version actually works. So here's the interesting thing is last year I was wondering why they were doing it when they had guys like Pettersson, Miller, obviously Hughes, that talent compared to what he had in Arizona, which obviously having the guys in Vancouver just way more talent. But this year is interesting because with injuries to Demko, Besser, and now Miller out for personal reasons, they kind of have to lean on this, especially because without Demko, they have Kevin Lankinen and Seelovs in net. And Lankinen's been average to pretty good. I think he has the record for most road wins to start the year or something like that. But yet Lankinen's been average, which honestly for a number 2 goalie, you'll take that 9 times out of 10. Seelovs has been horrible. But the Canucks have remained above 500. And if you look at Tocchet's system, if you watch it, I like it because it's a very aggressive forecheck system, and I love aggressive forecheck systems if you're going to play low event hockey. But they're fourth in shots against, they're first in expected goals against, and they're first in high danger chances against. So system bears out what they're trying to do. And again, given all their injuries, they have to play a defensive game, right? Because
Yeah,
they
they don't
just
have
don't
the they don't
have.
have the offensive talent to sustain this or sustain like playing like a higher event hockey. And I was actually gonna point out something funny too because I think when he coached in Arizona, we used to I hate to say this we used to shit on him because we were like you're supposed to play low event hockey yet you've never ranked higher than 22nd in high danger chances against. And his system back then really relied on his goal
Darcy Kemper,
Darcy
yeah.
Kemper and Antti Ranta
yeah.
playing out of their fucking minds. And that doesn't work when you're playing low event hockey because the point of low event hockey is to, keep things to a minimum. Don't give your goalies a super hard time. He literally was like, yeah, goalies, you can die. Sacrifice yourselves. There's a grenade, jump on it. Hope we're all good.
No,
and I'm gonna say
he made them target practice, but I mean low event in that like they still weren't generating chances. The whole point was kind of playing a more defensive style, but this time it's worked. Like this time,
yeah, it's working this time, which I'm surprised about. I actually thought Arizona
changes, right?
Yeah,
his forecheck is more up tempo, and he has honestly part of it is just he has more talent. Like at the end of the day,
well, yeah, he has more talent.
Yeah, certain systems might not work with certain teams, but like what helps is they're playing this low event hockey, and the guys they have are taking advantage, and it coincides with like like you look at Quinn Hughes, like I don't know if this is part of his system, if it's by necessity. You talked about is it by necessity or by design? But Quinn Hughes is shooting out of his mind right now, like in terms of just shot generation, everything flowing through him. Pedersen's gotten right, like although it's kind of annoying because him and DeBrusque streak at the same time for good or bad. But you look at the team and like the defensive structure they have, while even in their limited chances, allowing their stars to play. I like what they're doing, and I'll give credit. I was skeptical on the Tocchet hire when it happened, but he's done.
Oh, yeah, you were. I was gonna say for everyone that wants to know, you were totally against it, and I was in the same boat. I do think Tocchet's. I think one of the hardest things with coaches is they don't find a way to adapt their system. Right. For example, Exhibit A, Lindy Ruff. Let's just play, high offensive hockey and let my goalies, die a hard death kind of thing. Never adapted that. But I feel like with Tocchet, at least he's kept the same system, but he's at least tried to make some changes to make this.
Yeah.
He's made the system work, and I think you mentioned Vancouver having more talent. When you have more offensive talent like Pedersen, JT Miller, Besser, you can maybe score a bit more goals, but have like lower event like less higher danger chances and get away with that kind of thing. Plus, I think like you mentioned, Quinn Hughes is shooting more just because when you're playing low event hockey, you are prone to just kind of firing more shots, and you're less about trying to find higher quality shots, more just kind of hey, can I just get a shot off?
I just think but again, like I said, I think the thing is he has changed it though. Again, he has kind of made a more up tempo style, and he has leaned away from again having the goalies take on the bulk of it. And I'll say this: he's done like the last 2 years, he's done a really good job. I'm just curious to see what's going to happen with the next upcoming stretch because it's really, like I said, it's going to test the limits of his system and what it can do, especially because he doesn't have Demko or like a Kemperanta from back in the day just bailing out any bad decisions. Like they're really going to have to lean on this, and I'm curious to see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, this is the stretch. I think there's like two outcomes. There's like two potential outcomes with the Canucks, right? So if they kind of sustain their play and they kind of hold out with it, like they could. I could even argue they could finish, maybe like second in their division, or this could kind of be one of those things where the bottom falls out and they maybe fall to like fifth. I'd say,
but
fifth.
I will say if
fourth.
They're in a playoff spot, they're by far one of the most dangerous teams when everyone comes back healthy. Like that would be scary.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. Like if they're playing well without all their talent, you're kind of scared to see what they do with all of it, right? So,
and some of those, and if you get Miller, Besser, and Demko coming back for the stretch run, like that is a team I don't want to see, especially because, like I said, I feel like the last 2 years, Quinn Hughes has just ascended a level where if this is going to be him, he's going to be he's going to be in that Makar tier where he's just going to be in the Norris conversation every year.
And I think he was always like slightly below the Makar tier because he got a lot of assists, but he didn't get a lot of goals, and that kind of hurt.
His defense has also improved under Tocchet. Like he's never gonna be Jacob Slavin, but like his defense has definitely improved. And
Yeah,
I'm
it's more than passable, right? So like, and you can live with that
I'd
when
love
he
to
plays
ask
that well
like what the
offensively.
changes are specifically, but it's definitely improved for sure. What's your
Maybe I was gonna joke. Maybe one day we can bring him on the podcast. I'm just kidding.
I wish. What's your last topic there?
So this last topic is it's gonna stray away from any team, player, or any kind of topic. So this one's actually gonna talk about the league save percentage and how it's kind of plummeted over the last let's say the last 30ish. I'll say not 30, but like the last 5-10 years, it's really plummeted. So I'll start by highlighting one example, and I'm gonna pull up an article from I'm gonna quote. Article from Daily Faceoff, Matt Larkin.
Far removed from the days where Jamie Benn won the Art Ross with 84 points.
Yeah. So first off, shout outs to Matt Larkin from Daily Faceoff. So this article is his. None of this information is mine. Don't sue me. I don't need a lawsuit at this freaking point, or I don't need a copyright strike of some shit happening to us. So if you remember when the Oilers were tanking for Connor McDavid, right? You remember those years when they were just totally inept, useless.
I mean, that wasn't that far.
So that was about 10 years ago, though. So that is it's been a significant amount of time. So
right.
The Oilers goaltending duo back then was Ben Scrivens and Victor Faust. And they were, pretty putrid. So
shout out to Victor Faust.
Yeah. So they ranked 49th and 50th out of 50 goalies who played at least 20 games in save percentage. So they had an 890 and an 888 save percentage. Now, I want you to guess where would their save percentage kind of lie within the spectrum of goalies today, like in today's NHL this year's.
What was the number again?
So 890 and 888.
That had to be even nowadays. I'd say where it was back then or where it was now. Back then, I assume again you said that would be
back then they were the worst. They were 49th and 50th.
I'd have to assume it's probably close to maybe we have more teams now, so maybe 29th, 30th.
So it's funny because so the article states that they would actually be close. They'd be close to the league average. The league average goaltenders.
899 is league average this year.
They would not averagely, but they'd be closer to league average than the league's worst. That's the argument. So to put this in reference, so this is through November 11th, so it's been a few weeks since then. But
before you continue, people don't know how bad Oilers Ben Scrivens was. He was horrible.
Leafs Ben Scrivens was okay. Oilers
Ben Scrivens, yeah, okay. Oilers Ben Scrivens, bro.
Yeah. So through NHL games through November 11th, among goalies who played at least 5 games in this season, about 20 of these goalies have a save percentage under 900. So about 20 goalies that played at least 5 games, and the league average save percentage is actually at 900 on November 11th.
Man, that is rough.
So and this would be the lowest mark in 29 years. So, and it's funny because 10 years ago there was about 17 goalies that posted a 920 save percentage or higher. Right now, there's only 6 goalies. This is through November 11th, by the way, just so people know things that might have changed since then. So don't crucify me in the comments if you're like, actually, there's 7 of them. No, so through November 11th, there was only 6 goalies that had a save percentage that was better than 920. And there's a few reasons. There's a few things that people have speculated as to why this has happened. So
it's because Canadian goalies suck now. No,
well, that's probably better. I was gonna joke. I feel like there's a lot more Russian and American goalies now, though. No,
Russian, American, Finnish, yeah.
So there's more than
always has one good goalie they lean on every 5 to 8 years.
So I was gonna say with the amount of Russian, American, and Finnish goalies, that should balance out how bad most of the Canadian goalies are. Because we were gonna joke. I think that was it. The 4 Nations rosters were supposed to be sent in today, and Canada couldn't send in Joey Decor because he doesn't have a Canadian passport yet. So that's just for reference. That's how desperate we've gotten that we've had to ask Joey Decor.
They're trying to find. Hey, was your grandfather 4th removed Canadian? That's how bad it's getting.
Well, so his situation is he needs to get a Canadian passport in order to actually be able to play. But it's funny because at the World Championships, he can actually play for Canada if he wanted to. I don't know. I don't honestly know how that works with the IHF stuff. It's confusing. But back to the reasons for why the save percentage is as low as it is now. So the first one I think is the most obvious one is I think teams have gotten better with they haven't been settling for the lower quality chances. So goalies nowadays face a higher volume of shots, but they also face higher quality shots. And it doesn't matter how good of a goalie you are. If teams are getting premium shots in the slot, or if they're getting point shots that are just your goalie's just highly screened, chances are no matter how good of a goalie you are, even if you're like a Hellebuck, a Sorokin, a Shesterkin, those pucks are going to go in. It doesn't matter how good you are if you can't see it, or if it's, in the slot right in front of you and there's nobody, checking the guy in front of you. You're just going to let shots in. So that's kind of like the first reason. The second one,
another reason. Oh, sorry to interrupt.
Okay, so
reason,
yeah,
can I ask about this? Like,
yeah,
have power plays just become way more efficient? Is that a big
yes. So
part
that's
of
actually
it?
one
Okay.
of the. So that's actually the third reason I'll go through. So
sorry, if I apologize because I keep interrupting. But like one
yeah,
thing I did want to mention was that if you remember back in the day, I always talked about this. It's like power plays would always have two defensemen on the backside with three forwards on the front side, right? Sometimes you'd maybe have like Sergei Gonchar with the Caps would always come down and maybe they'd move the forward back up, but generally that's what it would be. And I remember when we were playing NHL 2003 and stuff as kids, they used to have this thing called the hero line where you would play one defenseman at the point.
Yeah, you had one defenseman, and then you just throw your four best forwards.
4 to 5. Yeah, exactly, yeah. Right? You would play 4 to 5 forwards. And I remember always wondering, I'm like, on the power play, why don't more teams incorporate this? And we would always wonder this, like, why wouldn't teams on the power play just play one defenseman back, 4 forwards in the front, and figure it out that way? And it's funny that, like, that change has only recently happened, I'd say, in the last decade or so.
Yeah,
where
so that's actually changed. Yeah, so a lot of teams are going with one defenseman, 4 forwards, and I think some teams that are getting desperate have tried 5 forwards, no defenseman, and that's something you would never see. You wouldn't see that very much. You wouldn't see that very much back then. And I think I was going to highlight, actually, it's funny because the number of power play opportunities in the league, like teams are actually seeing fewer opportunities per game now, and I think that's actually helped because a lot of teams have kind of phased out the bad power play habits. So like they're settling for less lower percentage shots. They're trying to go for more deceptive like puck movement, like more side to side like puck movement. And I think it's also the power play is also evolved too. A lot of teams play the bumper, like play a guy in the bumper slot, and that bumper guy doesn't like back then if they played one. A lot of times that bumper guy was looking to shoot, and I think nowadays the bumper guy's like just never shoots and just looking to make that like the next pass. And that kind of leads into the next point where I think with hockey nowadays, like it's a lot more east-west than north-south. And east-west is really bad for goalies because a lot of goalies play what we call like the VH technique. So it's like kind of like a butterfly kind of technique where basically a goalie puts the pad closest to the post, like parallel to the ice. And basically when they're trying to slide across and make moves like that, they're opening up a lot more holes. And shooters now are a lot smarter. They're, finding these kind of holes. And, when you're playing a lot of east-west hockey, you're doing a lot of cross creases. One thing that goalies were never super great at stopping was kind of like a cross crease pass, right? Like those nowadays are still like higher percentage, like those higher percentage shots are most likely goals now. So a lot more teams are settling for that. And one of the other ones they've also mentioned too is oftentimes on a rebound, a lot of times in the past, teams on rebounds just try to, jam the puck to the net. Like if it's a rebound, try to shoot it again. What teams are doing nowadays is that they're actually like passing up on the rebound. So they'll, instead of going for the shot, they'll try to go east-west off the rebound and to create like a higher percentage shot. And obviously that works against the goalies because, it's a higher percentage shot, hence it's more likely to go in. And I think that's kind of what's hampering like save percentages nowadays.
Yeah, I also think, again, scoring's gone up. Like I said, I was joking around, like JB Ben won the Art Ross with 84 points, less than 20 years ago? And now we've just seen an explode. Like, post that year, there's been an explosion of offense to where, if you're not a point per game and you're considered an elite offensive player, it just doesn't line up. And like you said, I think teams are just being, like, if you watch the way teams transition into the zone now, you're right. It's not just about taking the first shot you can get. It's about finding, like you said, the best possible shot where, like, even when they transition into the zone, it's not always a rush directly to the net. It's maybe a dump in, it's a kick pass to the back, and everyone starts setting up. And I think the other thing, too, that people have to account for is the offensive quality in defensemen has gone up substantially compared to where it was 20 years ago. Like, back then, again, I'm going to date myself here. You had guys like
Zubov.
Yeah,
like,
you got guys
Zubov,
like Zubov, Gonchar, just naming all the Russian guys. No, but excuse me. You had guys like Zubov, Gonchar, and but here's the thing: guys that were considered decent to above average offensive guys like Dan Boyle, Matthias Oland. Nick Lidstrom was like a really good defenseman, and he was a solid point producer, but he wasn't a dynamic offensive player, right? Now you look at some of the defensemen like Makar, Yossi, Hughes. In a lot of cases on the ice, they're the team's best offensive player. They're dynamic. They can rush. Back then, Carlson was an exception as to what he was, right? He was kind of like.
But now there's like three or four of him now versus like just the one, right? Like,
Right.
I think that's what's changed 10 years ago. There was just the one Eric Carlson that was putting up points. Now
And
it's like Makar, Yossi, Hughes,
Hedman,
Bouchard last year,
right? Like
Dobson, even
and-
to an extent, like just better.
And even on
defensemen.
lower level teams, man, you watch some of these teams with like that maybe aren't on the higher end. You see like a guy like Jake Wallman just rip absolute banger slap shots. You see Olin Zellweger's playmaking. Like the quality of offensive defensemen has jumped through the roof. And again, it's not like back and nowadays defensemen have to be like you can have a guy like Jacob Slavin who's maybe not good offensively, but those guys are very few far between. Whereas again, I remember like when the Dallas Stars won the cup, like you had Zubov was the offensive guy, Sidor was okay, but everybody else was like Matt Bichuk, Darian Hatcher, like all these like all these plotters, right? And you don't have those guys anymore. Now you look at a team, it's like their first pairing has an offensive guy, their second pairing has an offensive guy, maybe the third pairing doesn't. They usually have like two good teams have like 2 to 3 solid offensive options on the back end.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one last point I want to highlight too is I think the NHL's kind of de-emphasized like defense as a whole. I think like back then when you watched the NHL, there's a lot the defenseman could get away with a lot more things, like a lot more hooking, kind of like roughing, like cross-checking kind of maneuvers to slow down the teams. I think nowadays, like as a defenseman nowadays, you can't really hook, hold, or slash now as much because like you're gonna get called for it like 90% of the time now. So if teams are just getting to the middle of the ice and in front of the net like a lot easier, then there's gonna be more goals because off those rebounds, you're not able to hook a guy or slash a guy getting to the net. You can't kind of clear him out in front of the net. Like there's just gonna be a lot more like higher quality chances in front of the net if defense as a whole is being de-emphasized, right?
I do think it's an interesting contrast though, because like goalies are coming into the league, I'd say younger than they used to, and like the ones that do succeed are succeeding, which is I think interesting. But I do agree it is definitely a lot harder it feels like it's a lot harder to play goalie now than it's been in a while. Like I remember looking at like for fantasy, right? Looking at certain goalies' save percentages and GAAs and being like, again, maybe this is like the quote unquote old head in me, but like looking at some of their numbers, being like, yeah, this is kind of mediocre. And then, you line it up to the rest of you, like, wait, 908 actually isn't that terrible, right? So, no, I know what you mean.
I was going to joke the last time I think the last time we had some really, really good like Canadian goalies, right? I think this is like if we go back 10 years ago, like that, this is when I think Price won the Vezina and Price won the like Hart, right? I think it's funny because like the Canadian goalie like slow decline has kind of coincided with this whole like with the save percentage kind of going down over time too. Don't know if that those are correlated.
I mean, it's less goalies in the talent pool, I would assume.
It's something interesting to think about. I was just going to point that out just because we've talked about the Canadian goalie talent drain, right?
Well, yeah, no, it's interesting to me. I think that's why like the few elite goalies, you can kind of tell too because back then, I think there's also a couple other things. I think nowadays the workhorse goalie isn't a thing anymore. And I think that's another problem.
It's a lot more tandems, right? Like a lot more 40-game tandems, kind of 1A, 1B situation.
Right. You're just not having your starter play 6. So there's like maybe the save percentage is down because you're not having as many quality goalie starts, right? With the exception of Hellebuck and Saros, I think most goalies don't go over 60, and Shesterkin. Sorry, Shesterkin's another example. But outside those three, I think for the most part, most goalies don't go over 60. So it's like, whereas back then, like there's some teams who didn't even know the name of the backup goalie, right? Like goalies always, no matter what team you were on, for the most part, your starting goalie played like almost 60 plus games.
I was going to joke, especially with the Devils. Yeah, the Devils was always one because whenever I used to play with them in NHL, like I remember there was one game I think their backup was literally was just G backup. like or something like that. I don't know. So I think that's kind of
nameless character.
Yeah, nameless. It's like you didn't really know their back. You didn't really know who the Devils' backup was typically, for example, because you just knew Brodeur was going to start every game pretty much.
The only exception was like a Dwayne Rollison, Manny Fernandez, where you literally couldn't choose, right? And like both guys should get starts, but outside of that, it was like few and far between. There were a lot of guys that played sizable, again, 60 plus games. And I think another thing too is just I don't know how to explain this one as much, but I think part of it is just like there's certain goalies that are just phased out of the game now as much too, right? Like the stand-up goalie, like I think Ben Bishop was kind of like the last of a dying breed, almost in a way.
Yeah, I think every goalie now is like a butterfly, like big kind of butterfly goalie. Also, goalies nowadays too are like just getting bigger, but like you can't. I hate to say this, but you can't find a goalie that's like under 6 feet.
Saros and Wolf are the exceptions, I think. But
yeah, but I think for the most part, like you're 6'3" or taller as a goalie.
Yeah. No, for sure, it's tough. It's gonna be interesting to see what happens. I wonder if there ever is a positive regression, or if this is just the way it's gonna be going.
Yeah, I was actually wondering that too. I was reading that in the article, and it was like the question was, will the pendulum swing back the other way? So I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to see because if you remember the NHL coming out of the first lockout, the 05-06 lockout, the game kind of sped up a bit because it took.
Well, they made the rule changes too.
They made the rule changes to speed up the game, but then like by 2014, 2015, we got back to kind of like a dead puck era because it's funny because the article actually mentions Jamie Benn won the Art Ross with just 87 points. So right up to that point, and now we're going back again in that direction where now the game's gotten more open and there's more goals and save percentage is going down. So the question is, will we see it swing back to like, I'm not gonna say a dead puck
as
era,
long as we don't get to Guy Boucher terrorist hockey, I'm okay with it. Like
the 1-3-1. I'm good with the 1-3-1 power. Or I like a 1-3-1 power play.
I think we're okay.
Yeah, but not a 1-3-1 trap. I'm I'm against that. Nah.
Oh man. All right. My last point here is the Penguins have already flown south for the year. And something I never thought I'd say when considering we have Anaheim, excuse me, Anaheim, Chicago, and San Jose and Detroit. The Penguins might actually they feel like the worst team in the league. They play a fun and gun style when they should be playing a Rick Tocchet style low event hockey. Like, given their goaltending and defense, because the idea of playing fun and gun is you have a goalie that can bail you out. So, like, again, when Travis Green did in Vancouver, he had Thatcher Demko, right? When Paul Maurice did it in Winnipeg and they were leaking chances left and right, they had Connor Hellebuck. This team does not have that. And the results are bearing themselves out. They're second last or last in shots against, goals against per game, expected goals against, high danger chances against. They're not good.
Well, when you mentioned run and gun, it's literally first in high danger chances for and dead last for high danger chances again. It is literally polar opposites.
It's shinny. They're playing shinny. That's just what they're doing, and it's crazy to me that they're doing that despite their defense and goaltending. And their goaltending, don't get me wrong, their goaltending hasn't been good either. But here's the thing. If your goaltending is not good and you see these results you're having, logically you should think to yourself, hey, we'd be better playing a low event style, especially with guys you have like Crosby, Rust, Malkin, etc. But it feels like they're just doubling down on a system that doesn't work. And what did we always say the definition of insanity is?
Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Right, and it's crazy to me. And like, again, I don't like asking for people to be fired, but at what point is Mike Sullivan on the hot seat here? Because like, how do you look at this and not think to yourself, hey, we need to change it up?
Well, my other point I want to argue too is they have one of the worst like goalie tandems in the league, so trying to play the system feels kind of pointless. But it's funny because I think we talked about this for fantasy purposes. You picked up Blomqvist because you thought he'd like at least be this like answer their problems. It's funny because he hasn't played very many games, but if I had a look at his stats earlier. If I can just quickly pull that up. Yeah, he played 8 games. He had a 1.9 goal save above expected. He's your best goalie at this point, and you're not even playing him. And I hate to say this, but if you're trying to win a cup, or I hate to say this, they're probably not going to win one. But if you're trying to win a cup while Crosby and Malkin are still around, surely you play your best goalie, right? I get you invested money in Tristan Jarry, and like Ned's on a kind of a like a cheap kind of backup deal. But surely you play your best goalie, right? If you want your best chance to actually like quote unquote try to win.
No, it's weird, man. I'm like, I don't understand what they're doing, and it sucks because they're just ruining the rest of Crosby's prime. And it's crazy that his prime is extended as long as it has. It feels like it's like a prime that's lasted like 20 years, oddly, but like it's one of those things.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's just under a point per game. Like, and this is this would be considered a down year for him, by the way, quote unquote like, down year.
He's the most odd. He's the LeBron James of hockey, right? He's just automatic. But it's crazy to me that they're not considering of like part of like people talk about maximizing players' windows. Part of maximizing players' windows too is a change in coaching philosophy or changing systems to help adapt to what your team is, right? Again, I talked about Jim Montgomery doing that, and the Penguins haven't done it, and it's led to what has just been. If you're a fan of the Penguins, it's just awful to watch because it's just, again, it's just shitty hockey. And on nights where you have the worst goalie, which is a lot of nights, it just doesn't end well.
I was gonna joke maybe they should have gone after Montgomery when they had the chance.
They played Dallas recently, and like Dallas's power play was struggling, and the team was struggling offensively. And for me, I'm like, okay, this is the perfect time to like play a low event style and mitigate Dallas's chances because they're just coming out cold. What are they? Nope. They played an up tempo style, and Dallas scored 6 goals and ran them out of the building. And it was just a microcosm of what they're doing this year, and I don't understand it. Like, if they're gonna play this way, like they're looking at it like the season's over for them.
Well, I was gonna say the season
just migrate hibernating for the winner. It's done.
Yeah. I was gonna say I think you had Penguins headed south. I had the Wings got clipped for Detroit, so seems like it's a pretty tough time all around for the. I was gonna say the Penguins can't even fly. So I was gonna say tough time for things that can fly, but I can't even say that.
Oh yeah, true. Fine, they waddled south for the year.
They drowned south for the year.
But yeah, no. All right, moving on to the next one here. So this is one segment we do. It's called Thumbs Up, Thumbs Down. This is where we just like to highlight both good and bad performances in the league. So I'll start on the positive side. So I did an all goalie theme this week. My first thumbs up is Lucas Dostal, aka the Dostwall. This dude has been insane. And if we were to do awards, he would be my pick for the Vezina. I know people aren't going to pick him because the Ducks don't win enough, and people look at wins for goalies for some reason. Like it matters, but he's leading the league in goals saved above expected, despite the fact the Ducks are 30th in shots against, 30th in high danger chances against, and 27th in expected goals against.
Well, I was gonna joke. This kind of reminds me of you remember when John Gibson used to be good? Because I think those Ducks teams. I don't remember if those Ducks teams are really good defensively, but they weren't. I assume they weren't like very good defensively either. Although I don't think it was this level of bad. But I mean, Dostal has kept this team afloat.
He's risen above the Drek. He's been, and some of the games he's played, I was highlighting some of these performances have been crazy. Like there was a game, and these are in losses. He lost 2-1 to Pittsburgh. He faced 45 shots. Like he's had above 900 save percentages in games where he's given up like 4 goals. Like he faced Colorado, they gave up 49 shots.
The 45 save. Yeah, I remember seeing that one. You texted me that one.
I remember the Isles game. He won 3-1 despite facing 40 shots. Like he's been insane this year, and like people say, oh, he has periods where he doesn't play as well. Like honestly, with the way the Ducks have played defensively for Gibson, who
has good periods playing for them exactly, right? So
like the way Gibson and especially Dostal have played has been incredible, and like I just have to give credit here because it's like his performance is Vezina level good for a guy who's relatively young. Like all the credit in the world. Because
I was gonna say too because we thought Gibson was kind of dead in its rights, right? Because like he's been downright putrid these last like 3-4 years. Even Gibson this year is kind of, I want to say, he's like found his form again. Like he's not Like he's
Do
quite
you think they
overpaid
went
for
to
a
each
goalie.
other? We're like, well, if Mick Cronin's not going to help us, we might as well try to help ourselves.
We might as well try to help ourselves. Exactly. Yeah, I feel like they had a talk and they're like, well, we just got to do something to save our asses, right? So
Like, Ducks games legit look like, if you watch the first Mighty Ducks movie before the Mighty Ducks started winning, when they were getting the shit kicked out of him by the other teams, that's what it looks
was this like
except
was
they
this like when
actually
they had
a
no
goalie in
equipment?
it.
Was this like when they had no
Yeah,
equipment
that's
and
what
their
it
goalie
looks
had no?
like some games. Like,
Because I
it just
remember
looked like
their
they're-
goalie had no pads. Like they were wearing like
Except, like, it just looks like that, but they put Julie Gaffney in. Like, legit. Like, it's so bad to watch. They just get, like, they get outshot every game, but Dostal, like, for the most part, has still showed. And, again, just gotta give my salute here, because every other goalie could just, like, you know, lesser goalies would just pack it and blame their defense, but he's still fighting, man.
fair.
All right, number 2 on my thumbs up section here, Connor Hellebuck. So this was just a legacy pick. I'm tired of people saying, like, Connor Hellebuck to me is already a Hall of Famer, like, no question. He's been by far, I don't say by far because Vasilevsky's been there with him, but I think Vasilevsky started to peter, whereas Hellebuck's just gotten better and better. It feels like Hellebuck's a throwback to the goalie that actually plays, you know, close to 60 games a year, which is a rarity. He plays a ton of volume, and he's been insanely consistent compared to, in an era where the save percentage has gone down. Connor Hellebuck's just been unbelievable, and I have to give him the credit. Right, you look at his numbers year over year. He's a career .917 save percentage in an era where goal scoring has been as high as it's been. He's won 2 Vezinas. He looks like he's on the way to winning his 3rd this year, knock on wood. He's finished 2nd once before. He's finished 3rd in Vezina voting another time. Like, it's time we kind of give him his due as the best goalie. Arguably, I'd say the best goalie of the 2020s. I think that's fair.
Yeah,
I just think it's time we give him his due. And he's done it through every, like,
He did it through the
changes.
He did it through the Paul Maurice terrorist for goalies kind of system. He's done it under, I think, was it Rick
Bonus's more defensive system.
defensive,
He's done it under Scott Arniel. He's done it through personnel changes, coaching changes, like everything. And he's been so consistent year in and year out. In a lot of times where goalies might have one elite year and then peter out and be inconsistent, you can at minimum rely on 60 games of above average goaltending from Connor Hellebuck for the most part, and like that has to be lauded in today's era.
All right, so who's your third thumbs up, I guess?
Have to go to Big Wolf on campus, Dustin Wolf. Man, he's been, for a rookie and for a guy who's undersized relative to other goalies, he's been unbelievable, and he's, I think, one of the main reasons keeping Calgary in unexpected playoff contention.
Yeah, they're tied with the Oilers, and they're a point behind the Canucks. So, I think Wolf's been a big part of that. I mean, I think 14th for all goalies in goal save level expected, 5.1. I mean, especially when they lost like Markstrom, like having traded Markstrom, you expected their goalie position to kind of, you expected it to regress heavily. It's regressed for sure. Like, it's not, Markstrom, I think, was probably still a better goalie.
Markstrom is peak, yeah.
Yeah, Markstrom is peak, but like for what you're getting from Wolf, and he's gonna hopefully just continue to get better, I think you're perfectly okay with what you're getting out of him right now.
He's been great. Like, he's my favorite for the call. It's weird. We haven't had a goalie like play this level. They're called, like, we had Binnington for a bit, but that was only 20.
But Binnington only played 30 games, right? I think we argued about it.
Like,
so like, if he gets it in 30 games, like, what's the point?
I like Wolf. It's crazy because he's smaller. He has to be really fundamentally sound, and he's so fundamentally sound for a young goalie. It's crazy. And I like seeing this. I like seeing guys translate from the AHL, where Wolf was, 2-time AHL goalie of the year or something like that?
2-time AHL goalie of the year, yep. He was,
yeah,
he had nothing
translating
left to
the pros. Because a lot of times there's such a disconnect a lot of times, it feels like, between what somebody does in the AHL level and what they do at the NHL level. It's nice to see somebody just come in, take a bit of an adjustment period, and just kind of get back to what they were doing. And I have to give them credit.
I feel the same way with the forwards too, like in the AHL, like the point per game forwards in the AHL, but they come to the NHL and they can never produce. Like, my favorite one was always, like, was it Rocco Grimaldi? Like,
No,
is it
it's
Grimaldi?
yeah, like there were a lot of guys, like even goalies to an extent. There were goalies who
Robbie.
like
I was
always.
thinking Robbie Shrimp as a forward,
Well,
who,
Jack Campbell when he was with Dallas was pretty good in the AHL. Never did really
but then just couldn't
anything
cut it
with
until he
Dallas.
got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, Ben Scrivens could be another example, but
Well, I was gonna say at least he had decent stints at certain
with
points.
Toronto,
It wasn't like
yeah,
just
for sure.
Toronto and LA to a certain extent, but like he was downright putrid in Edmonton. Although I don't know if that's a him problem or if that was the team problem. I think it was a bit of both.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of both.
But yeah, no, I gotta give credit to Big Wolf on campus. He's been amazing. All honestly, again, in a year where you talk about goaltending's declined again, it's nice seeing some really standout goalie performances, especially from guys like Dostal and Wolf, where you don't expect it, and two, they're on the younger side. So like I like seeing. I hope these younger guys keep on their trajectory. I hope we get back to a level of elite goaltending like we had. I always dream for 90s level goaltending where we had guys like you had your constants like Hasek, Broder, Belfour, and Waugh, but you also had guys like Felix Potvin. You had Olaf Kolzig, guys like that who year to year weren't those elite guys but could steal a top spot. And I hope we get back to that.
For sure.
All right.
So I
Now
guess maybe
for
I'll go
the
with my thumbs 3 down. So I'll take the thumbs
section.
down. So I'll actually start with the goalie too, just for the jokes, because you went with 3 goalies. I'll start with the goalie as my thumbs down. First one, Jeremy Swayman.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie.
guy-
When you said the first goal, there was a lot. I was like, "Who's he gonna?"
There's a lot.
mention?
There's a lot I could have gone. There's a lot I could have honestly gone with. I heavily debated going Tristan Jarry, but I think just because it was Linus Ullmark. I could have even gone like Connor Ingram if I really wanted to, just because Ingram had a really good year last year. I just went with Swayman because like he was, arguably he was
paid.
like, yeah, he got paid, and then he's kind of shitting the bed now. So obviously 10th worst in goal save above expected. He's a minus 6.4. He's on a just to help emphasize the point. He's on a better team like defensively than a Dostal or a Wolf, right?
That's fair.
And
That's a fair
he's getting like shit on in that regard. Like Boston's not as good defensively as they've been in previous years, but it's not like they're 32nd in like high danger chances against, and they're just like hanging him out to dry. He's facing 40 plus shots. He's getting shit on. Like he faces like 24, 25 shots a game, and he's letting like 4 or 5 by him. And I've also heard like I don't know if this is true or not, but it seems like there's some hard feelings kind of lingering in the dressing room around him, and like him taking so long to get the training camp with the whole contract thing, and obviously him getting paid now and not performing probably doesn't make his teammates feel that confident in him. There's some lingering feelings with them. Don't know how much that's affecting him as play as a whole, but there's just a lot going on with him. And then I think again, when Dostal and Wolf are like completely outplaying you, like on significantly worse teams.
It's not even just those guys. Like Saros is playing really well too, despite how bad Nashville's been. Mrazek's been decent, despite how bad Chicago's been. There's guys who are outperforming their situations. Like I'd argue to an extent, like Joey Decord is too. Again, like I think there's.
I'd argue even like. Yeah, Sam Howell's playing out his mind. I was going to argue even some of the elite goalies who are having like not so good years, like Shesterkin's having a down year compared to his standards, but he's still like positive in goal save above expected, and he's still playing like a decent like goalie. Like if I sub Shesterkin for Swayman, I think I'd be like, if I'm Boston, I'd be like, I'll take that 100% of the time.
I think what sucks for Boston is they have no room for like their team's built in a way that Swayman has to be good too, which makes.
And he's not, and because he's not, the team's not doing that well, right? They're just lucky that, like you said, Buffalo, Ottawa, Detroit, and are just still really bad.
For sure.
And even Montreal. Sorry, I forgot Montreal's the last one. I was blanking on the last one, but Montreal is still pretty bad too. So they're lucky that there's 4 teams worse than them. Hence, why they still have a shot at the playoffs. Although I think if I had to look at the Eastern Conference as a whole, and I think they're still technically out of a playoff spot right now. So.
No, for sure. Yeah. What's your second one there?
So my second one, I'm going to go with Zach Hyman. This is a guy where I don't know if you remember this. People were arguing that he was like one of the greatest like free agent signings of all time. And this year he is only.
For people that don't know, my group chat is it's me, my friend Tyler, my friend Justin. One's an Oilers fan, one's a Sens fan. I'm the Stars fan. So trust me, this Hyman thing was a big topic of contention last year.
Yeah, so Hyman only has 8 points in 20 games this year, and he was like he had 50 goals last year. So he was like, and it was kind of like a breakout year, not something many people expected. like he was going to be a good linemate for McDavid, but they didn't expect to get 50 goals out of him, right? And this year he's only on pace for 12 goals. His shooting percentage last year was around 18.6%. His career was around 13%. So obviously you expected some regression. Like you didn't think he would score 50 again, but you probably expected like maybe he'll hit 30. Nope, not even going to hit 20 this year potentially. His shots on goal as a whole is dipped. He's going to get around 200 shots compared to the 290 he got last year. And I think it's kind of funny because I think him struggling and the Oilers power play struggling like kind of like happened at the same time, because the Oilers had like one of the most potent power plays in the league last year, right? And I think this year they're a little bit closer to league average as a whole. So I think that's kind of contributed to that a bit.
So I kind of expected regression because if you remember, I forgot who pointed this out. Somebody, I can't remember if it was, and I do apologize because I'm probably going to butcher this. I can't remember whose Substack it was. They point out goals scored within, like, in terms of where the dimensions on the ice.
Yeah, dimensions of the, so he had the most.
Most of Zach Hyman's were literally around the crease. So he was basically the equivalent of, if you ever follow NBA basketball, he was the equivalent of a center who would just get lobs and putbacks and dunks as like his primary, like Rudy Gobert or Clint Capella, where like if they scored, it would be their point guard giving them the ball, like lobbing it up to them, and they dunk it home or put it in.
They're like within 5 feet of the rim, right? Yeah,
right. And that's kind of what Carter McDavid did with Zach Hyman last year. And there's always going to be regression from that because that's just not sustainable, right?
Yeah, but I don't think you expect this kind of regression, though, right? You don't expect to go from 50 to 20 or 12. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. I didn't think it would be this bad, and it's funny because another candidate for regression, Sam Reinhart's like beating through it. So but it's it's not surprising. It's just surprising the level to which it's fallen for sure.
Okay, so maybe I'll go to my last thumbs down. So the last one, I'm sorry, bro. This one might hit you a little bit in the feels. Jason Robertson. I was gonna say your boy because like he's technically like plays for your team.
No, he's on. Yeah,
he's your boy. So 14 points in 23 games. He's on pace for 49 points, which would be his like worst year like point per game wise. And just to highlight this, I think one of his worst. His rookie year, he had 45 points in 51 games. So that was like 45 points was his worst ever point total. And that's because he played in a shortened season. Like I think that was the 56 game COVID year, all the Canadian teams in the same division.
And he was really good that year.
He was really good that year too.
I think he finished second in rookie of the year. Yeah, he finished second behind Kaprizov.
Yeah. So he's on pace to have one of his worst years. One thing I will point out, his shooting percentage is about 4% lower than his career average. So maybe there's some slight positive regression, but I don't see it completely offsetting his point totals the way it does. His shots per game has also gone down significantly over the course of like the last 2 years. So the year he scored 109 points, he had 3.81 shots a game. I think last year was like 2.81, and like this year he's on pace to finish I think with less than 200 shots. So I don't know what's happened with that. I was wondering maybe if you could explain that. If you've watched him play, maybe you could explain.
Robertson's kind of interesting because if you ever watch him, he's not the kind of player that he doesn't wow you with his physical traits. He's like I don't want to compare him to Draisaitl because they are obviously different. But if you watch Draisaitl, like he kind of doesn't even seem like he's in the play sometimes until he picks the spot and lets it rip, right? And Robertson's kind of similar where like he doesn't beat you with anything, and that's probably why he slipped to the second round. He doesn't wow you with any like superb physical skill or like it's not his skating, it's not like his speed or anything. It's his positioning, and he knows where to be, right? And his ability to improvise in small quarters is pretty good. And I think that's where like that's why it's weird when he's not, because when he's producing, I don't explain it. He looks like a ghost when he's producing. So when he's not producing, it's even more like pronounced, right? But I don't know what it is. It's just I know at the beginning the Stars under DeBoer were rolling like even lines, which means all their lines were basically playing the same minutes. And I get why, because like Dallas is a very balanced team. But to me, at some point, I think you kind of have to let your best players be their best players. And I think hopefully throughout the year, it starts to be that they just start leaning on their top line more, kind of thing.
Well, I was
or
gonna say their top
two
line as a
score.
whole has struggled, right? Like I think Wyatt Johnston hasn't been like everyone expected him to have like a breakout.
Well, they've been
year. He
moving
hasn't-
Wyatt Johnston around, but I do think part of it is like
even like
yeah,
Rope Hintz
Johnston,
too hasn't been.
yeah.
Yeah, Hintz hasn't been super great either as a whole. So I
I
think the
do
whole
hope
line in
it's
general
just-
has struggled.
I do hope they're just off to a slow start, and that's what it is. It's hard to tell with Robertson because, like I said, even when he's productive, sometimes he looks like he's not involved anyway. So it's like again,
Yeah.
when he's not scoring, it's really pronounced. But I do hope it's just a slow start because again, it's not just if it was just him, I'd be worried. But because there was Hintz, Johnston, and Heiskanen, and I can't even just say it's a team wide thing because Stankoven and Duchesne and Marchman have been really good, right?
Yeah.
So
I feel like the Stars as a whole, they always have. It's always like you never can like put the forwards can't like put together their play all at the same time.
all at the
It's
same
like,
time, yeah, it's crazy.
yeah, because it's like you remember because like I think it was like Sagan and Ben carrying them for the longest time, and when they finally faded, Hintz and Robertson kind of like took center stage,
Right.
and now Hintz and Robertson are kind of having their struggles, and like
As,
Marchman,
like,
Duchesne, and
and then
Stankoven are coming.
Sagan went
yeah.
healthy too, yeah.
Yeah, Sagan
No,
when
I hope
Sagan
they
when
get it all
healthy.
clicking. It's just it's the thing with Robertson is it's a rough watch because he's not playing differently, but again because of the style he plays, if he's not scoring, it's just such a rough watch. So I can understand the concern for sure.
All right, so I think those are my 3 down. So I think we have one more segment left. I think maybe do you want to explain the segment for the
Okay,
viewers?
so
Because-
we're gonna start doing this weekly. This is my like, I don't want to say I stole the idea from other places, but I did. I'm not gonna lie. So it's guess that player, and the way we do it is, I'm gonna pull up a hockey reference page, and I'm gonna show it. So each week we're gonna alternate. So next week WillyDubz will do it for me. I'll do it for him.
Yeah.
So 3 points if you guess the player right on the first go. Then we'll give you 2 points after the first hint, 1 point after the second hint, 0 points if you get it incorrect. The first hint will always be where he was born. So like, in Canada we'll specify the province. Other ones will just state the country because I like if a guy was born in Kiev versus like, wherever, like Moscow versus like, I don't know, St.
Yeah.
Petersburg. Does it really matter to you? No. And then the third one will be what team drafted him.
Okay.
Or sorry, the second hint will be what team drafted him. We have personal parameter rules. So for me, it has to be a player who played from 1990 on, and for you, it has to be someone who the majority of their career was at least in 2000 and on, right?
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
because like none of us will get any of it if we're just pulling up guys from the 40s and 50s. So
I was gonna say also I was also for reference I was born in '99, so like I didn't really see much of the '90s to be fair. So
well, yeah, I was a 90s baby, so like for me, most of the guys I grew up with, like if their bulk of their career was in the 90s, it's fine. But if you're pulling up like Alex Delvecchio or something, I'd probably look at it
like Ted. I was gonna joke like even like a
no,
bigger
like
name,
some
Ted,
of those guys
Ted
who play
Lindsay.
their career, yeah, but like some are obvious. Like you can tell Ken Dryden's by Montreal, and like there's certain ones that are obvious, but yeah, I get, like so. Anyways, this is what we're gonna do. I wish it's like a guess that Pokemon kind of thing. It's like who's that Pokemon, who's that player. But yeah, this is what we'll do. I picked the player first. Since I talked about a Ducks player today, I decided to pick a Ducks player to share here. So I'm going to do that here quickly. 1 second.
Yeah, just pull it up on screen. Let's see it. I didn't. So for reference, because we did fail the I have a few failed recordings. I have seen at least the stats before, but like I haven't actually obviously I don't do any digging on this because that would defeat the whole purpose of this exercise.
All right, so here's the player.
All right, so let's take a look.
Just to let people know, MDA, and you asked me this once before, I think, is Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. So after Disney sold the team, you'll see it goes from Mighty Ducks of Anaheim to Anaheim. It's not like some random team; it's the same team. I don't know why I appreciate Hockey Reference for trying to be accurate, but yeah. So this is the player. As you can see, had a pretty good semi-season peak before a fall off.
Yeah, I'll kind of talk my thought process. So when I saw the Anaheim and San Jose, so without looking at the stats,
well,
when I see
St.
Anaheim,
Louis.
Or sorry, St. Louis. Blah, I don't know what I said that. Blah. So Anaheim, St. Louis. My first thought for some reason was obviously like Paul Kariya, like before looking at the stats, because I know he played for the Ducks and then he eventually played in St. Louis before his career ended. And like I think his career ended in St. Louis like in his like mid-30s because of concussion issues, right? So that was kind of my first guess. Obviously, you look at the stats. That is definitely not fucking Paul Kariya, to say the least.
Well, also Paul Kariya played in Anaheim for 1 year with Teemu Selanne, if you remember.
Oh, you mean do you mean Colorado or sorry? I'm thinking.
Yeah, sorry, Colorado. Sorry.
Yeah, Colorado.
Yeah,
Colorado, so I don't see the Colorado there, so that's how I don't think it's Paul Kariya.
Well, obvious one is he was on their Stanley Cup winning team.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, the 06-07. If this was a defenseman, I would have thought. No, I don't think it was that. Okay, so let's see. The 06-07 year, he had 78 points. Holy smokes. Okay, so I know for a fact it's not. Yeah, so it's not Ryan Getzlaf. Getzlaf and Perry were drafted in the same year. That was 03. So that's not Perry and Getzlaf.
I just took that in. He's older than Perry and Getzlaf. I just took that in.
Yeah. Well, I know Perry and Getzlaf are from the 03 draft because that 03 draft is one of the like I think we've talked about this. One of the all-time drafts. Yeah. So 78 points. Damn, that is crazy. 85 points as a center. I'm blank. Let me see. So, Lady Bing, a Selkie, a Calder.
None of the awards are helping you here on this one.
Yeah, these are bad. Like, there's not even anything close to like.
Like nothing. Especially because, like, does anyone know the Lady Bing winners each year? Like, probably.
Well, I was gonna say, like, if you finish, no one knows if you finish 16th in the Calder versus like top 5, right? So, in fairness, that there is that. Okay, so
all right,
he was
point. So do you want the first hint of?
Yeah, I'll take the first hint.
Where they were born, he was born in Strathroy, Ontario, so Canada.
That does not fucking help one bit. I'm just trying to remember who was on their first line because I feel like he was probably a first line player. 34 goals. What the fuck? I'm trying to remember who was on those Ducks teams that won the cup because I know Perry and Getzlaf weren't.
It's crazy how deep those teams were.
Yeah, they were a very deep team because like Perry and Getzlaf were playing like third line minutes.
It's like you don't know who you're not blanking on who this guy is, and again, 78 points in 82 games, right? So,
well, he's not like the elite like 100-point kind of guy.
No, for sure, but like you know what I mean, like
29. Damn, that is. He's not young. I know it's not. Okay, so sorry, random thought. I saw left wing, but it's definitely not Dustin Penner. That's what I remember. I think he was a part of that Ducks team that won the cup, though. I think.
I mean, Dustin Penner had guys fighting in a barn over him. This guy.
Yeah, and then.
Oh, I will say, like, even in some of the later years, like you look at the production, like 44 points in 46 games with St. Louis, 50 points in 58 games, 22 and 25. Like, I will say with this player, like. It's weird because he did have the peak, and I always thought he was going to be something a lot more than what it ended up being. But when healthy, he was still a pretty solid player overall.
Yeah, I'm still blanking. I may need the second hint, man. Like, I don't know what it is.
Okay, this one, so draft stats, he was undrafted.
Fuck, I don't even think that helps.
One of the rare undrafted success stories, because a lot of guys that are undrafted don't end up becoming anything. Like, it's really rare you get... Obviously, Martin St. Louis is like the 99th percentile of outcomes.
Yeah, like that's... Yeah, so he's like...
I mean,
he's
like,
what, 90...
His career is still pretty good. I'll say undrafted, and he went to Colgate, which I didn't even know was a university. Like, when I read that, I thought it was a joke, because all I know Colgate
was like a toothpaste brand,
Yeah,
right?
I was like, did he go to dentistry school? But no. He played college hockey at Colgate and went undrafted.
You see, I'm gonna kick myself because like I feel like the when I hear the name, I'll be like, oh, but then like you're not because there's so many people on that Ducks team that I just can't. Fuck, I just can't put a name to the face. I can't even think of Ducks like apart from Perry Getzlaf. I think was it Pronger and like Jagier. Like I can't. I'm trying to picture the names of the players that were on that cup winning team.
I can always think of random Ducks players. So like. Maybe it's because I have a Ducks jersey in my closet, but all right. Do you want to just?
Yes, it's not him. Yeah, so he's not a center. I can't. It's not Bobby Ryan. He's not a center. Fuck, I'm like blanking. I can't even think of a center on that team apart from Getzlaf, and Getzlaf was like the third line center. Can't even remember who was captain on their team either, man. This is blanking. I'm blanking on this because I remember. I hate to say this, but my only memory from this cup was what was it? Chris Phillips putting the puck in his own net on Ray Emery.
I just remember that Sens team was like dominant. The pizza line was crazy, and then the Ducks just buzzsawed them. It was crazy. All right, do you want to just take a guess?
Bro, my guess is so bad that everyone's gonna laugh at me in the comments because it's not. But he's the only other forward. He's the only other forward I can think of on that Ducks team. It was like Rob Niedermeyer, like the only other Ducks forward I could think of on that team. I know it's not him.
Final answer, Rob.
No,
Niedermeyer.
It's not. That's the problem.
Okay.
I'm still blanking on
you
names.
You gotta give me a final answer here, man. You gotta...
Guess that, bro. I feel like you picked the most random one too, because like I know he had a decent career.
Though. It's
yeah,
not
but like
you had it.
But you picked an undrafted guy, so it's not even
it's
like
not
a guy
like I picked Sammy Paulson or something. You know.
Okay, yes, but he was like a fourth. He was their fourth line center. He was like their face-off kind of guy.
I thought he was.
I swear he was a center. Bro, see, we can't even like see. This is my point though. You can't even remember if he was like a forward or defenseman. Like, fuck it. I'm just gonna say Rob Niedermeyer because I know it's not, and I just want to get this over with, and I really don't want to deliberate on this any longer. So, just tell me. Just give me the X.
Final answer, Rob Niedermeyer.
Yeah, and it's not Rob. I know it's not Rob Niedermeyer. For everyone,
that is incorrect. The answer to the question is Andy McDonald.
Who the fuck would have guessed that? No. Okay, if you thought Andy McDonald would score 85 points in the league, you're telling me it's
that's what makes this interesting. If you look at his career, it's actually it's crazy for an undrafted player. Andy Mack, point per game, won a Stanley Cup, near point per game, 52 and 82, and then near point per game for a couple other seasons. Pretty cool.
Well, I was gonna say it doesn't help that you picked a guy that's a similar name to a skateboarder too.
What?
So there's Andy McDonald and there's Andy MacDonald who's a skateboarder, who's a British skateboarder, who's competed in the Olympics.
I only know Tony Hawk and Bob Burnquist. So,
bro, everyone only knows Tony Hawk, man. Anyways,
but,
that was an epic fail.
So
but to be fair, I don't think
the score is 0-0 with Wilson having one attempt.
Bro, I'm about to just be a dick and just pick someone random, man.
Andy McDonald was known. It's not like he wasn't a somebody.
Okay, but he had I hate to say this, he had 2 really good seasons. The other ones were okay, but then
he was a good player.
I still argue this is a pretty random one. I'm not saying you have to pick Getzlaf or Perry, but this is kind of out there.
Okay, add in the comments if you think this is an out there choice. I think it was fine. I think that's part of the fun of these is
because I remember watching the baseball ones, but I can guess some of the baseball ones just from looking at it, and they're not it's not like Derek Jeter or Alex Rodriguez is the picks, right? So,
all right. Well, yeah. So like I said, we got it 0-0 with WillyDubz having his one attempt. Next week, WillyDubz is going to pick the player for me, and just judging by his tone, it's not going to be fun. But yeah, that we'll be doing this every week. At the end of the season, we'll see who wins, and we'll see. I don't know what the reward should be. Should we say winner gets a jersey, Mike, sub from the other participant? Is that what we should do? Or
I mean, that's not a bad one. I thought you were gonna make me get a jersey from Fanatics, and I was like, "Yo, that's a crime." Man.
No, dude. That
For those who don't know, we're completely against Fanatics and their jerseys. And I've also seen a lot of Reddit comments.
This hat's Mitchell and Ness for the record.
I was gonna say a lot of the comments on Reddit say that the jersey quality is bad because I've heard the names on the jerseys peel off after a certain time, which is
I can't even call them sweatshop level because sweatshop level is probably better. So I don't.
Well, it's probably also a crime to all sweatshops. Yeah, it's a crime to all sweatshops too to call them that, right? So.
Those sweatshops aren't using the suicide nets like Apple for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Just last bit of news here before we sign off. So interesting post. Somebody put up the Thanksgiving standings for what the playoff matchups would be if the season ended today. Now, this is just by points, not by points percentage, which I don't know why people do it by points still when we know points percentage is a thing.
Yeah, because I was gonna say like some teams have like 3 games more than other teams right now. Like that matters. Like at this point in the season, it matters. Like maybe like later down the maybe like let's say like 3/4 of the season, it doesn't matter that much because like the point disparity gets wide enough where those 3 games don't really matter. Like they don't make up the gap, but those 3 games definitely make up the gap right now for sure.
Exactly. So the post Thanksgiving playoff picture, we just go by points, right? So first playoff matchup in the West would be Calgary and Minnesota. My battle of the mid actually taking place here. Dallas and Winnipeg, which would be a crazy first round matchup.
Yeah, that's like a that's a conference finals matchup. That's not a first round matchup to say the least.
And another conference finals matchup, Vegas Edmonton round 1.
Jeez.
And then the Kings and the Canucks, which is like, I feel like if you're the Kings, you're just happy you're not playing the Oilers. You're like, thank goodness we're just not playing the Oilers. And yeah, like the other two matches.
A team, or was there? Sorry, so a team like was it like Colorado's not even in the playoff hunt or not
right
even in the
now?
playoff
Yeah.
yeah. So
and my favorite is if you go to the East. So Florida and New York would be the first one, which is interesting how far New York's fallen from last year. Oh, my favorite, because we have to do this every year for some reason. Toronto, Boston.
I joke if you're a Leafs fan, like me, like you should just never escape Boston. Like,
here's the thing, right? I feel like Boston doesn't want to win the series because they'd rather tank. But like, if you're the Leafs and you lose to this Boston team, like, I don't want to say you have to fold the franchise, but like, there have to be some drastic like changes. You might have to go murder like somebody in a Lucky Charms outfit or something. I don't know, because it's like. You have to start your own like you have to make your own luck at that point.
I was gonna joke. It's like those soccer teams where like those like African soccer teams where they always joke like they like they hire like a witch doctor like to curse the other team kind of thing.
Yeah, they need to get like. Did you ever watch Major League? They need to get Jobu.
Oh yeah, he had the like the statues in his
the religious right? The prayer statue.
Yeah,
he needs to get the Leafs need the Leafs need their version of Jobu. And also, funnily enough, or they need like, maybe voodoo dolls. Maybe like a Jeremy Swayman voodoo doll would work. I don't know. Maybe.
I mean, if you can't beat him as bad as he is right now, then I don't know when you're going to beat him at this point.
Yeah, no, it's fair. And then the battle of the surprising teams would be the Caps Flyers.
That would be that'd be a really interesting series. Not gonna lie, just seeing like Michkov and like.
Michkov and Ovechkin, that'd be cool, like a passing the torch moment. And then another banger, Devils Canes round 1 would be crazy.
Ooh, that's a good one, actually.
Like, just looking at these, I feel like a lot of these are skewed by the mandatory divisionals round 1. So, like, for example, I don't think Jets Stars should not be a round 1 matchup, and I don't think Canes Devils should be a first round matchup. And I feel like Leafs fans just don't want to see Leafs Bruins again for the millionth time. Like, what's your take on this whole like divisional thing as it's been the mandatory divisionals round 1 as that's been?
I was gonna joke. I feel like it's screwed. I will say like I feel like it's screwed the Leafs over a couple times for sure. Like you always just end up facing Boston no matter how well you do end up playing, right? Like we're third in the division. Like I think, and it happened with like when we played Tampa too. I think one year we ended up having to face. I think we had Tampa, and then we lost them in the Game 7 on home ice, right? So you get screwed a bunch of those just because you end up playing against a team.
It's also usually not great for Dallas. Like, and honestly, most of the Central, like outside of Minnesota this year, but like you think about it, it's always been Dallas, Winnipeg, Colorado, in some capacity.
Yeah. And you're gonna end up getting stuck. You'll get stuck against like Colorado or Winnipeg potentially, depending on where you finish. Like you have to finish first to avoid one of them. If you finish second, you're gonna get one of those 2 teams, right?
And like people talk about rivalries, and here's the thing: I like the idea of rivalries, but to me, maybe it's because I grew up in the '90s watching like peak playoff hockey. Like '90s hockey has to be rivalries have to be natural. Like if you remember, Avs Red Wings, Stars Red Wings, Stars Avs, Devils Flyers. A lot of that was natural. It was teams at their peaks meeting. And
they usually met in the conference finals.
Conference finals, right?
Yeah.
And there was like this anticipation, even some of the smaller teams, like Flyers Leafs, you wouldn't consider a rivalry, but it was one because the Leafs just couldn't beat the Flyers back then, and Jeremy Roenick being Jeremy Roenick doing Jeremy Roenick things. But again, I think the Battle of Ontario Sens Leafs was like its own unique thing because it always happened in the first round and it became this thing. And when it comes naturally, and again, as teams are in their ascending points, and because it's when you get to this round, it's like, we beat this team, we know we're going somewhere. It's such a bigger deal than, we're just meeting in the first round because that's how the divisional structure ties up. And it doesn't feel natural. Like, Dallas facing Colorado.
I do miss the 1 through 8, like being able to play against teams that are not in your division, like at least the opportunity to have that happen.
And who's to say rivalries don't develop from that, right? Like, it'd be interesting to see if that happened. And the worst part is sometimes you just have these match divisionals, and it's like, what's the rivalry in Kings Oilers? There isn't one, right? What's the rivalry like? Leafs,
it's just the Oilers beating down the Kings, like just brutally.
I feel like Leafs Bruins would mean more if they happened to meet each other in like the if Leafs ever got past the first round, but like if they happened to meet with higher.
Oh, I was gonna say they made it past once at least. It's not like we've never.
But if they happen
to
just if it happened to be with like, say they made it to the conference finals and something was on the line and it didn't feel forced, because like at this point, I don't know about how Bruins fans feel, but aren't Leafs fans just like kind of not about it, but like. It just kind of happens so many times. You're just kind of.
It's like an shit, here we go again kind of.
But it's happened so many times, right? It's just a kind of a whatever thing, no?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, I don't know. I hate looking at some of these matchups and knowing that, like, again, I think Dallas and Winnipeg, the way Winnipeg's played so far, are 2 cup contenders. One's going to be out in the first round. Vegas and Edmonton were 2 preseason cup contenders. One's going to be out in the first round. Like, New Jersey, Carolina having to play round 1 is crazy, right? Like, yeah. And it's just I don't know. I think
the divisions like ruin ruin the potential conference finals matchups. Like, I just feel like we want the good teams to be able to, like, we don't want the good teams.
And there is such a thing as a harder path versus an easier path, right? Like Dallas last year, what they had to go through to get to the conference. Obviously, Edmonton beat them, and fair play to them, but like. What Dallas had to go through with Colorado round 2 versus like Edmonton, where you have LA, you're like, some divisions just get it better. And I'd like to go back to 1 to 8 and just see, like, and again, have natural rivalries based on team strengths, and also just have not eliminator contender matchups in round 1.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't want to see good teams get eliminated in round 1 just because of, the quote unquote divisions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, anything else you want to talk about for this week, or?
No, I think we're good. I mean, we're almost at the 2-hour mark. So, for those who have stuck around, thank you for sticking around and showing your support. We definitely appreciate it, and you'll definitely hear more from us next week. Don't know if it'll be 2 hours long, but we'll see what happens. Sometimes we go off on a tangent.
First episode, sometimes we just kind of keep talking, and like you kind of get into a mindset. So sometimes we'll talk about stuff normally. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, this is the first episode. We're going to start, putting things out on social media, start uploading things to YouTube. If you guys could give us a follow, like, subscribe, or even just engage with us on social media, it'd be great. Again, next week, we'll probably do some fantasy stuff, and then we'll kind of do similar segments again, where we're going to talk about things we look at around the league, 3 ups, 3 downs.
I think the week after.
I have to guess the player next time.
I was gonna say the week after, probably. I think the week after we'll probably talk a bit about the World Juniors, because I think that's right around. Because I think that's when the NHL.
You will talk about the World.
I'll talk about it, but well, I mean, you're gonna have to know a little bit about it too. But I was gonna say, because I think the NHL does, like, around Christmas time, it just does slow down a bit. So I think talk about the World Juniors a little bit would be nice. We are a hockey podcast after all. I think you quote us as an NHL podcast. I'm like, we're a hockey-ish NHL kind of podcast.
Well, like I said, we'll see you guys next week. For us at Toe in the Crease, I'm SJ. That's WillyDubz. We're signing out.
We're signing out. Peace.
Later.